For months and months, the government argued that above-inflation pay rises would themselves be inflationary. Today, MPs' pay has been increased by 5.5%, an above-inflation pay rise that takes an MP's starting salary to a smidge over £90,000 a year. IPSA, who decide on MPs' pay, say this rise is in line with what senior civil servants got and that, quote, serving as an MP should not be reserved to those wealthy enough to fund it themselves. We believe our decision recognises the vital role MPs play in our democracy and considers the continued economic challenges facing the country. The changes mean the Prime Minister will now earn north of £160,000 a year. That extra money will go further thanks to heavily subsidised bars and restaurants in the Palace of Westminster, with MPs, of course, able to supplement their income with second jobs and generous expenses. So here's what I'd do. And this, I accept, is not going to make me popular, but I am not here to be popular. I would pay MPs a lot more than 90 grand. I'd pay them at least £150,000 a year. But I would significantly reduce the number of MPs. I would make it a condition of their employment that they can't have second jobs, and I would reduce their expenses. That, I think, would be fair. Everyone else, largely, everyone else has had a pay rise, and there's the hypocrisy about it being above inflation. But to deny MPs a pay rise because they're MPs is, I think, pretty vindictive and pretty dumb. Again, I'm not here to be popular. As you'd expect, the story has been picked up and discussed by some of my colleagues over the last 12 hours or so. This is what Dr. Parth Patel, a senior research fellow at the Institute for Public Policy Research think tank, told Ian Dale last night about why the public often instinctively react negatively to news of MPs being awarded a pay rise.
It's because people who aren't top earners in this country have felt a real sharp squeeze in their spending power over the past 2 years, the sharpest squeeze in modern history. And so people feel that air of unfairness. The thing that really matters is that your experience of the world shapes your view of it. And that matters for MPs more than most people, because they make decisions on our behalf, including decisions on how inflation is felt. And so if they're feeling the inflation crisis, their experience of the cost of living crisis is quite different to a lot of your listeners, then it's reasonable to think that they're making decisions that might not be in the interest of people who are experiencing the cost of living crisis in that way.
Dr. Parth Patel. Dr. Peter Carter was on last night on LBC, the former chief executive of Nurses Union, the RCN. He said he could see the argument for MPs being better remunerated, but that this announcement is badly timed given how small public sector pay rises have been over the last few years.
I've long said our MPs need to be paid more. The problem is that since 2010, the successive governments of this regime have preached austerity, and nurses particularly have been on the end of it, because last year nurses got the lowest pay deal of all public sector workers. So now people will see it and say, my golly, these people who we think are already getting a very good salary, are getting even more, and we're still being preached at that we can't afford a decent pay rise for us.
Dr. Peter Carter. Scarlett Maguire is director of the polling company JL Partners. Thanks for coming on the programme this morning, Scarlett. I imagine it's pretty difficult to sell this one to people, particularly at this time in their financial lives.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. Pay rises for MPs have always been, or at least, in recent history, been very, very unpopular, especially since the expenses scandal. You're sort of looking at overwhelming numbers there whenever this has been polled before. This latest rise has not been polled yet, so we don't have figures for it. But I can only imagine after everyone tells us in the polls how sort of under the cosh they're feeling due to the cost of living, rising prices, bills, absolutely everything else, that this is not going to go down very well.
It's not going to go down very well. Neither is it going to go down particularly well, I don't think, by saying I believe they should be paid more.
No, I mean, I think that is a very worthwhile debate to be had, and I think there's a lot in that. Although, no, I don't think that will probably go down very well either with members of the public. I do think, though, and I think this is actually probably part of it, is part of the reason why I think this might go down particularly badly with people, if they're paying a lot of attention to it, that is that I think people increasingly feel like they're getting less and less for their politicians anyway.
Correct.
So, frustrations that we hear in focus groups is that they're sort of saying, they're just like fighting with each other, or they're not actually getting on with governing the country. Parliamentary, or why does nothing work? Why aren't they doing anything? Now, that might well not be true. You might think MPs are working very hard to do things. You might not. But either way, I think it's even harder then for people to wear a pay rise that the taxpayers are paying for when they don't see what they're getting for it.
Scarlett, appreciate the time. Thank you. Scarlett Maguire, Director of the polling company JL Partners, on what MPs do for their money. Front page of the Financial Times gives us an insight today. The working day for MPs in the House of Commons chamber has been shorter on average this parliamentary session than in any other in the past quarter century. Oh, God, it makes my argument even harder, doesn't it? Emma Revel is a spokesperson for the Centre for Policy Studies think tank. That doesn't help the argument that MPs are trying to make that this is a fair pay rise, does it? Morning.
Morning. No, it doesn't. And I agree with you. In principle, they work incredibly long hours, and parliamentary sitting and debating hours are only a small part of what MPs do. And I think that's one of the problems that people find it quite hard to encompass. When, we say, Parliament's in recess for a couple of weeks, people automatically think, they're on holiday. They're not. They're back in their constituencies. They're working, in other ways just because they're not in the chamber. And I happen to agree with you, quite properly.
I think I'm going to form a club, Emma. I'm about to form a club. I think it's going to be you and me to start out here, because this is going to be the most unpopular organisation ever.
Deeply unpopular, I'm afraid, but that doesn't mean that we haven't probably got a point. MPs do an incredibly long hours. It's almost impossible to get your head around the issues that even a backbencher with no ministerial role, no sort of select committee role, they still have to be on top of an almost unfathomable breadth of local, national, international issues. They're running 2 offices, one in the constituency, one in Westminster. They need to be present in their constituency. They need to be present in Westminster. And it is an incredibly difficult job, but it might be hard to, engender sympathy for someone earning over £90,000. But as you said at the beginning, the Prime Minister's salary is about 160, just over. You can top out at 130 if you're the head teacher of a school, and that is also an incredibly difficult job. But most people would agree it pales in comparison to being the Prime Minister. So if we want to have MPs who represent all walks of life, who don't go off into the private sector for money, or aren't put off by, the hours and the work levels, and also, we haven't even touched on the abuse and the risks to MPs' personal safety that they face, then we need to have a salary that accurately reflects the work volumes that they have.
My support for this pay rise, Emma, is conditional. As I say, I would pay them a lot more. I think about 150 grand a year as a starting salary would be enough to get going. But I would significantly reduce their expenses, and I would significantly reduce the number of MPs, and I would also say that MPs cannot get a second job.
I think I'm with you on expenses. I think certain, second jobs do add to what MPs are able to do. It would be difficult to say,
that's it.
Doctors, nurses, lawyers. We have MPs who are still registered GPs or registered legal professionals.
If it's that tough a job as you've just described, how on earth can they possibly do one of those jobs well? If they're both a GP and an MP, they can't do either of them well.
Well, I suppose it depends on the hours that they're doing as a GP, and as I say, it can be sort of keeping your foot in the door with a profession that you've worked quite hard to be, to get to the level that you have before entering Parliament, for example. But I think that if that was the route we went down, cutting back expenses and cutting back on second jobs, I think that is something that would at least make it more palatable to the general public if we were to pay MPs at the level that you and I might think that they should be paid at.
Emma, appreciate it. Thank you. Emma Revel, spokesperson from the Centre for Policy Studies think tank. Come with me on that idea. I know it's not an easy sell. 5.5% pay increase, you'd have loved that for the job you do, and you probably work a lot harder than MPs, particularly if their working hours at the Commons have hit record lows under this particular Prime Minister. Daily business completed in just 7 hours. You work a lot harder than 7 hours a day for a lot less, and with a pay rise that didn't amount to 5.5%. But I do still think MPs are underpaid for the job that's expected of them. I think that pay should be increased. If you look around the world, there are leaders of countries who are paid many, many, many times more than what the Prime Minister of this country is paid. As Emma pointed out, there are some head teachers in academy trusts. If you're the head of a big academy trust, you could earn way more than the Prime Minister. Is that right? Does that say something about the job we expect of them? I would increase MPs' pay tomorrow by about double, but I would stop them from being able to have second jobs. If it's really as hard as Emma was describing, it cannot be right that they then do other jobs alongside to earn a bit more money. They focus entirely on their constituents and on the work that they're doing. They're paid very well for it, about 150 grand a year, I'd say. Their expenses are cut and there are fewer of them, and we go from there. Does that not feel fair? Or do you still think they shouldn't get a pay rise because they're MPs and you just don't like the idea of it? I think that's pretty vindictive.